Good morning, everybody. All Out Blitz, Week 2. I'm your host, Adam Mankuta, here to answer all of your fantasy questions, your gambling questions, give you some breaking news as it happens here, give you the analysis you need to win your fantasy matchups and those bets for Week 2. Last week, if you tuned in, we had some really high recommendations here. The Baltimore Ravens defense. We said they'd shut down the Bills. They certainly did that. Held them under the 6 points we predicted. That's a win. We also told you the Chargers and Chiefs would have a fantasy bonanza out in California. And what happened? Tyreek Hill, Patrick Mahomes, Phillip Rivers, Melvin Gordon, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, all these guys blew up last week. Great week for all of those guys in the fantasy bonanza extravaganza. We also did really well here in terms of hitting on the Saints offense, but oh my goodness, what happened to that Saints defense? Tampa Bay took them apart. I apologize to Ryan Fitzpatrick, Mrs. Fitzpatrick, the entire Fitzpatrick family for doubting you going into New Orleans and winning that game and putting up 48 points in the opener. Great job by the Bucs as they look to go 2-0 this week against the defending champion Eagles. But we'll go back to the Saints, who have a chance of redemption today, and that's exactly where we're going to touch off first. Is some breaking news that happened last night is that their opponent for Week 2, the Cleveland Browns, announced that they will either release or trade the uber-talented wide receiver, Josh Gordon, early this week. Many fantasy implications here. Let's touch on the injury to him first. It was reported yesterday that he would miss 2 to 4 weeks because of a hamstring issue. Again, we don't know the severity. They're being pretty close-lipped about this injury. But what we've heard is that it happened at a promotional video shoot of all things. So Gordon, who already was going to be out this week against the Saints. Also, there are reports coming out, and again, we don't know what's true and what's false, but there are reports out there that he might be having some relapses with his alcohol problem and addiction, which is obviously more important than the on-the-field issues that Gordon has in terms of getting on with that hamstring injury. So this has a plethora of different fantasy implications, both for the Browns, for your teams, your DFS lineups. So let's cut this down first. First and foremost, get him out of your lineups. Obviously, we don't know what team he's going to be on next, if he's going to be on a team. The Browns have said that they want to trade him potentially, but what team is going to really invest even a conditional draft pick in a guy that has this history of substance abuse and now potentially a hamstring injury? We don't know how the injury really occurred and whether this was a sanctioned promotional shoot that Gordon went on for the Browns. So again, get him out of your lineups, and we'll talk about Gordon in a second. For the Browns today, I would downgrade Tyrod Taylor just a little bit, but again, we saw what the Bucs did to the Saints last weekend. The Saints should be playing better, but I think Taylor, with his running ability, and if you get points for rush yards from your quarterback, he's still a pretty decent play, especially for streaming purposes. So the other thing I would mention is this is stock up for Jarvis Landry. I just added him in my DFS lineup. He already is going to get a ton of targets. If they're playing from behind, much like I thought the Bucs last week, he's a great play. He's going to see a ton of targets. I also think that Antonio Callaway is a name to keep in mind and keep in the back of your head today. We'll see how he performs now that he's going to have a much more increased role. He's that talented rookie also with problems off the field from the University of Florida last year. He's someone I take a look at. David Njoku also in the red zone where Gordon's a serious weapon. He might see some more touches around the red zone, so he's someone to keep in mind. Turning our attention to Josh Gordon, again, where is he going to end up? We really don't know at this point. Report this morning said he was eyeing the 49ers potentially, which is a logical fit given Kyle Shanahan and his history there. Also, the injury to Marquise Goodwin. There's an opening there. Potentially in Dallas is another place he'd like to go. But can you imagine Josh Gordon? And what if the Dallas Cowboys lose tonight and go 0-2, and they have a firestorm between Jason Garrett and Dak Prescott? Now, granted, they have a hole at wide receiver, and he'd be a serious upgrade there. But to be honest with you, Gordon, as you'll see here in some highlights from last year against the Chargers, he's so uber talented. But is he really the guy that you want to bring in at an 0-2 start and, deal with the locker room there? You just got rid of Dez Bryant. Who knows what the situation is going to be there for Josh Gordon. So again, they want to trade him. My guess is he'll probably get released because no one will find him. If he wants to go to the 49ers or Cowboys, there might be an opportunity there. Some other teams to think about when you're talking about Josh Gordon, you got the Indianapolis Colts, and think about it this way. They have an all-pro wide receiver in T.Y. Hilton, but they have an owner who's dealt with many of the same problems as Josh Gordon with Jim Irsay. Maybe there's some cohesion there of Irsay looking out to help Josh Gordon. They're looking for another playmaker. Their second best wide receiver is Ryan Grant, who's more of a receptions guy, not a big play threat. Imagine adding Josh Gordon to Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton. That's a legitimate offense right there. Granted, they have no one to protect them from the offensive line, but that's someone to keep an eye on. And of course, the Patriots. We've heard this song and dance before. Corey Dillon, Rodney Harrison, these trouble guys come in, they become great citizens with Garrett Blunt, and they turn it around, win Super Bowls for Belichick and the Pats. As a Pats guy, I'm all for it if that's what they want to do and take a risk here. They don't get Edelman back for 2 weeks. Maybe this hamstring's miter, and they hit a home run here. And I think Belichick and that organization can certainly get through to Josh Gordon. But again, that's something to keep an eye on down the road. Dez Bryant's another name that comes up here. I'm stashing him on my benches. You know that, if you watch Hard Knocks, you saw Dez Bryant visit the Browns in the preseason. So I think he's someone to keep in mind as a potential replacement for Josh Gordon. So that's that story for the Cleveland Browns, which is really great. I do think that his value, Josh Gordon, long-term, all depends on his landing spot. If it's going to take him a couple weeks to get involved in the system, maybe he's a second half play. I do think, though, if he lands with the 49ers or the Cowboys, they have decent quarterbacks in situations there where they need his help, so his value will be at the highest. But really until we get the real story here of what happened, I'd hold off on Josh Gordon, at least playing him or rostering him. If you own him, see what you could potentially get for him for an owner that might be out there. A couple other pieces of breaking news. Greg Olsen, the star tight end for the Panthers, he's going to be out 4 to 5 weeks with his injury. Delaney Walker, the Titans tight end, out for the season. If you're an owner of one of these two, I was a Delaney Walker owner. Some guys to immediately take a look on your waiver wire. Ricky Seals-Jones, tight end from the Arizona Cardinals, is one. Eric Ebron, who caught a touchdown from Andrew Luck last week, he's another possibility. George Kittle's more of a high upside guy. I'm sure he was drafted in your yearly leagues. You could try to trade for him. Big news out of Tennessee today on both sides, both Tennessee and Houston. Let's start with Tennessee. They were a mess last week against Miami. Nothing got going offensively. Corey Davis was a no-show. Derrick Henry was even worse. And now Marcus Mariota is probably going to miss significant time this week, and Blaine Gabbert's going to be playing quarterback. So if you have any other option, if you drafted Corey Davis, you're going to play him because he's dynamic. If you drafted Derrick Henry, you may have to play him. I'm one of them, and I'm not happy about it. But Dion Lewis, Jonnu Smith, the tight end, the other guys on the receiving corps, Rashard Matthews, those are guys I wouldn't be playing, especially in DFS, even Corey Davis, because who knows who's going to be throwing him the ball. The other thing I would say, too, for the Houston Texans, the Texans are going to be without Jadeveon Clowney today. So that's a big injury in terms of their pass rush. I do think, though, Deshaun Watson worked some of the rust off in week 1, and they should be having a big week this week against the Titans, who got lit up by the Dolphins last week. The only other thing to mention here, breaking news-wise, in terms of fantasy, is Joey Bosa, the star defensive pass rusher for the Chargers, is going to be out till at least October. So that does hurt the Chargers pass rush. It shouldn't come into play today as they travel to face Josh Allen, who's making his first start for the Bills, but something to keep an eye on. So with that being said, let's turn our attention here to some of the weather and questions that you have. I do think some of the games today will be impacted by Hurricane Florence. That's certainly a topic of conversation. We certainly wish all of our viewers out in the Carolinas the best. I do think the one game to keep an eye on in terms of the weather is Indianapolis and Washington. Again, if it's going to be rainy, windy, that's not a great element for Andrew Luck, who's coming back from the shoulder surgery, to be playing in, as well as Alex Smith. But I do like Alex Smith in this spot, and it's because of the Colts secondary. We saw what Andy Dalton was able to do last week. He hit A.J. Green for a deep ball. He hit John Ross at the goal line. I do think the way Smith plays, he's very conservative. They don't have a huge big play guy to stretch the field. Paul Richardson could be that, but I think the Jordan Reed combination in the red zone is a huge one. He's healthy. They'll be relying on that, and we'll also touch on Adrian Peterson in this game. So that's one of the games that certainly will have the weather implications. The others should be okay. The weather in New York here, as the storm kind of works its way up, for Dolphins, Jets should be fine. It's beautiful. It's 80 degrees and sunny. I'm going to my son's flag football game right after this, so that should be great and exciting. So the weather is good there. Some of the other questions that we have popping up. Do I like the Jets D against the Dolphins, from Howie? I actually do like the Jets defense a lot today. And the reason for that is simply because the Dolphins are not that good. The Dolphins had a good week last week against Tennessee. Remember the key with that game last week with Tennessee and Miami? That game lasted, 30 hours because of the 2 or 3 stoppages because of the thunderstorms and the lightning. So both teams weren't ever in a rhythm. So that, to me, gives more of an edge to the offenses who have to go against the defense. The defense has to react to the offense. But for me, the Jets were dynamic on Monday night against the Lions. They got a punt return TD. They got a defensive touchdown. So I do think that they have the ability to shut down Ryan Tannehill. Marcus May's a big miss this week. He's out. So I do think that Tannehill will put up some points. But again, as I'll reveal later, I am taking the Jets in this one to go 2-0 which for a Pats guy is not really what I'd like to do, but I do think they win this game, and I do think they force Tannehill into some turnovers. I don't like the Dolphins' rush game either. They got Gore, Drake, Ballage. Three-headed monster means you don't have one true running back. So for me, I would play the Jets defense today. I'm actually playing them in my DFS lineup. So Howie, my advice to you is absolutely go for it. Who won't replicate their Week 1 performance? Ryan Fitzpatrick. I'm sorry, Mrs. Fitzpatrick. It's not going to happen twice. He's now going up against the defense that won the Super Bowl, and yes, they gave up a billion yards to Tom Brady in that Super Bowl, but we know how good that Eagles defense is. They just shut down Matt Ryan in Week 1. They shut down Matt Ryan in the playoffs last year. They pretty much shut down Case Keenum and the Vikings in the NFC Championship game last year, and no one's going to stop Brady. So now the Eagles, who are relying on their defense, travel to Tampa, and I do not think that lightning strikes twice for that Tampa Bay Bucks offense. Deshaun Jackson's a question mark. He's not 100%, was battling with a little bit of a concussion. Love Mike Evans. I'm not sold on Peyton Barber. O.J. Howard had put up some numbers last week, but again, everyone put up numbers last week against the Saints. I think I could have caught a few balls and gotten in the end zone. So I don't think Ryan Fitzpatrick is the one that's going to replicate his performance this week. I also think, turning it around, I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to replicate his bad performance from last week this week. Last week, 3 picks in the loss to the Vikings. They actually kept that game closer than I thought they would. This week, they host the Lions. We all saw what Sam Darnold just did against the Lions at home. Now they travel to the West Coast. Short week. I like Jimmy G here a lot. I think that the key note here is Dante Pettis, and we're going to touch on him a bit later on as well. Rookie out of Washington, scored a touchdown last week. He's going to replace Marquise Goodwin, who has seemed to be Garoppolo's favorite target. I do like Pettis, his ability to get behind the defense. We saw what Robbie Anderson was able to do last week for the Lions. Against the Lions with the Jets. So I do think that you will have a dynamic passing attack here today from Jimmy G. Trying to look at another person that might not replicate their output from last week. Case Keenum's a guy that a lot of people have asked me questions on this week. He's someone that the Vikings said we're not going to take you. We're going to go get Kirk Cousins. I do think Case Keenum's a guy that, depending on the matchup, you might not think he's going to get it this week as well as he played last week against the Seahawks. I do think today, though, against the Raiders, he has another nice day. But he's someone that I think will continue that upward trend that you might not be expecting from Week 1 to Week 2. Barkley goes over 100 yards against the Cowboys. Yes. I am very down on the Cowboys, and that's why I would not want Josh Gordon to go there. I think that situation is one that easily and quickly can dissolve into a huge mess. Ari, who is our Dallas guy, was on all week talking about with his fans. Do you want to have Jason Garrett fired? And a lot of the people in his audience were saying yes. And before I touch on that, you'll see here on the bottom of the screen, we're trying to do a little more interactivity here. We're trying to promote you guys as well on the forum. So if you think you're going to win your fantasy matchup this week, certainly hit that checkbox emoji that is provided through Facebook, and the X if you don't think you will. I actually had to digress, sorry, about Howie with your question about Barkley. I think I'm going to win this week. I had A.J. Green, who went off on Thursday night, but I also had the Ravens defense. So kind of killed each other, but I'm hoping that we have some surprise plays there, which we'll get to in a second. But yes, I do think Barkley is going to go over 100 tonight. I think they'll try to key on Beckham. I think Ingram's going to have a big night. And we'll see how that Dallas defense reacts. I mean, they didn't really give up much to the Panthers in the rush game, but I do think the Giants want to go heavy with Barkley tonight, establish him, and then work on the passing game. So yes, Howie, I do think he goes over 100 for the second straight week. Greg, who's a good kicker sleeper? I don't think I've ever heard those words ever uttered together in one sentence. If you got a kicker sleeper, Caleb Sturgis is a great name. He's my kicker this week. He's on the Chargers. They're going to put up a lot of points in Buffalo. We saw what Buffalo did last week. Nothing. So as long as the weather's fine, and I think the reports I saw this morning where they are, I like Caleb Sturgis there, certainly to go up into Buffalo and get a bunch of points. And then again, you got to look at the offenses that, this week we expect to score a lot of points. So Washington against that Colts defense, as long as the weather's not bad, I like that option. You got kickers in, for the Rams. They're going to put up a ton of points this week against the Cardinals. I like that option. So again, take a look at your matchups. You got the Chiefs kicker, Bucker, going up against the Steelers. You got Boswell, I believe, for the Steelers going against Kansas City. So again, save the money if you're playing DFS. I know some of the sites eliminated kickers. But if you're in a yearly or keeper league and you need a kicker, I think those are a couple of good options. And then the old reliable too. Again, as long as the weather is okay, Adam Vinatieri, all this guy does is kick field goals. I mean, he's one of my favorite players of all time. Couldn't have been a nicer guy. I met him a few years ago up in Buffalo during a Pats Buffalo game. Nice guy. And I think he's going to actually have a decent day because I don't think the Colts are going to be able to penetrate to the end zone on the Redskins defense, who played really well last week. So Vinatieri may have a handful of opportunities this week to get you some fantasy points. Let's see, as I'm kind of scrolling through some of the other questions out there. Keep them coming. I know one question that came in this morning from out west. My brother's out in L.A. He couldn't be on the stream this morning, but one question he had for me was potential handcuffs. And again, this is a term for people that are in yearly leagues. If you have a stud running back, who are the best handcuffs to have just in case someone like Todd Gurley gets hurt? So for me, this is the way I would rank them. Todd Gurley is the best back in the league right now to me, so you got to have his backup. We thought it was John Kelly at the end of the preseason, but it looks like Malcolm Brown is that guy. So if you have a bench spot available and you're a Todd Gurley owner, I'd go with him. I think Javarius Allen, Buck Allen, who scored the other night for the Ravens, is certainly an option, especially now with Kenneth Dixon out for the Ravens. So if you are an owner of Alex Collins, who struggled the other night, if he goes down, or maybe if Allen outperforms him, he's a certain handcuff to have in all leagues, and he probably is gone in most formats. Corey Clement, guy caught a touchdown in the Super Bowl. I still don't think it was a catch, but he's with J.A. Ajayi's handcuff right now. Ajayi had a very nice week one, a couple touchdowns, so he's one to think about. Latavius Murray is a very interesting name. He's more of a plotter. He's not going to excite you. He's not great out of the backfield. But if anything happened to Dalvin Cook, he's certainly someone to keep an eye on as we move forward. Another question here that came in from a buddy of mine. Aaron Rodgers is a hot topic this week. He had the injury last week. Superman came back last week, led his team to a victory. Today, they are in for it against the Vikings. They're actually a pick that I flipped on last night after reading reports that Rodgers, this is an injury, and it was just reported by Adam Schefter, that this is an injury that actually could keep him out in most seasons for a month, and he's going to play today. I don't necessarily like him as an option. I think that against that Vikings defense, which shut down Jimmy G last week, if you have a competent backup, I think this is the week where you have to play them and you have to sit Rodgers. I don't think in DFS you can play him at all. He's going to have one of the higher price tags, and it's too risky for me. So for me, Rodgers replacements, Jimmy G, I mentioned him. Alex Smith, mentioned him. A couple others. Nick Foles. Think about this. Yes, the Buccaneers won the game in New Orleans last week. They also gave up 40 points to the Saints. Drew Brees went off. He had a great day. Michael Thomas had a great day. Alvin Kamara had a great day. Ted Ginn scored a touchdown. So for me, Nick Foles, who struggled in week one against a very good Falcons defense, is someone to keep an eye on. Decent weather down in Tampa. Low price. Could probably get him off the waiver wire at this moment. I think he can play. Case Keenum's another option. I think that, as I mentioned, going today up against the Raiders, who got lit up by Goff last week, Keenum threw for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns last week. He's a safe play. And the other one to keep in mind is Tyrod Taylor. To much of the point, if Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to throw for over 400 yards and put up 48 points against the Saints, why not Tyrod Taylor? He still has Jarvis Landry. He has a couple decent tight ends. He's got Duke Johnson out of the backfield. He's got a good running game there as well with Carlos Hyde. So I think, as well as the fact that he can get you rushing yards and rushing potential touchdowns like he did last week, I think Tyrod Taylor is another interesting name to consider if you're looking for someone to step in for Aaron Rodgers this week. Keep those questions coming. Some other sleepers that I wanted to mention here. Case Keenum we just touched on. TJ Yeldon. Leonard Fournette's not going to play today. Even if he does suit up, I don't expect him to play much. TJ Yeldon is better in terms of all-around skill set. He's great out of the backfield catching the ball. He scored last week against the Giants, and you saw how well he did there. I do expect the Patriots to key on the ground game because they don't think Blake Bortles can beat them, especially down a couple receivers like they were last year in the AFC title game. I don't think that they were worried about Keelan Cole or guys like that. So for now, I would go with TJ Yeldon if you can already pick him up, or even play him in DFS. He's not a bad option. Adrian Peterson. I never thought in a million years that I would think that Adrian Peterson would be a startable fantasy option in any format ever again. And last week, this is some highlights from last week. Adrian Peterson, you can see here, caught the pass out of the backfield, brought up the sideline, broke tackles. This is like it was 2007 or 2008 again for Adrian Peterson. He was dynamic. Even watch this catch in traffic. Watch that. Boom. Great catch. Turned it upfield, made the move. I mean, he's a punishing runner. This is a guy that still thinks to this day he could break Emmitt Smith's rushing record. Maybe if he plays in like a senior league, he'll catch up to that Emmitt Smith rushing record, but that's not going to happen. But he broke tackles last week. He was dynamic. You could see that extra burst there to get the first down against the Cardinals. So again, I think he's someone that could potentially impact your team this week against the Colts defense that had Joe Mixon run all over them last week. So I love Adrian Peterson this week. Dante Pettis is a name I mentioned earlier. Marquise Goodwin likely out for the 49ers. Big play option, was always a big play guy at the University of Washington. He took punts and kick returns back. He has all sorts of records at the school there. So if you get special teams touchdowns too, maybe there's a chance Pettis does some returning of punts and kicks today as well. And Nelson Aguilar, again, who is that receiver that's going to step up for the Eagles now with Alshon Jeffrey still out? Yes, of course, Zach Ertz is a great option. And against Tampa Bay, we saw what Mike Thomas did last week. So if you're in a PPR league, I love Aguilar today as a wide receiver too, simply because his target share is going to be there. He's going to get a bunch of looks. He did last week, had a bunch of catches in the opener against the Falcons. So I really do like him there. And the other name to touch on is Case Keenum. And here's his performance, some of the highlights from last week against the Seahawks. Look, yes, he made some bad throws. He had 3 interceptions. But did they win the game? Yes. Did he throw for 300 yards? Yes. Did he lead them to a fourth quarter comeback? He did that also. This guy is a winner. He was a big winner at Houston when he was in college. Put up enormous numbers with Patrick Edwards, his star receiver at the time there. So that's a huge guy that I know he has the success and the pedigree to do it. Last year, with the Vikings, he took a team that once they struggled and didn't have Teddy Bridgewater there, then lost Dalvin Cook. He stepped in and took over and performed exceptionally well, which landed him in Denver. He's got 2 amazing weapons. He's got Demaryius Thomas. He's got Emmanuel Sanders. He's got Royce Freeman out of the backfield. He's got this other guy, Phillip Lindsay, now coming out of the backfield. And this guy's got an offense that's cooking. We saw what happened to the Raiders last week. So again, I think that he's someone to certainly keep an eye out for this week in streaming leagues and in yearly leagues as a potential replacement for the guys we've already mentioned. Anyone else that comes to mind will certainly touch on it here. I think that Tevin Coleman's another name that you may be considering. Devontae Freeman, as we reported Friday, is out today. Might be out for a couple weeks. Tevin Coleman's going to get the lion's share of duty today for the Falcons in their game against the Panthers. Against Panthers, great rush defense. But if Coleman's the guy that's going to get all the touches out of the backfield, expect him to have a pretty busy workload today. 23 touches. I would say probably 16 to 17 rushing attempts. He'll obviously get some of the goal line work. He's going to get catches out of the backfield. He's certainly someone to keep in mind. I like George Kittle this week as a tight end sleeper. Last week, many of us said stay away from him against the Vikings, yet he still put up numbers. So if he's going to do that against the Vikings defense, what's he going to do today against the Lions defense? I think he'll have an opportunity there. Keep an eye on James White again today. It is the latest news out is that Rex Burkhead and Sony Michel will be active for the Patriots. But that does not mean that they're going to play extensively. So for me, James White is a great running back 2 or PPR flex play because who else is going to get the touches out of the backfield? Jeremy Hill is out for the season. I don't trust that Burkhead's 100%. He had a concussion last week. Sony Michel coming back from an injury. To me, James White's ideal. I'm rolling with him in my lineups. So that's one there for sure. And again, whenever you have comments, if you have questions about your lineups, I certainly want to answer those for you. Continue to either go thumbs up or thumbs down in terms of if you think you're going to win your game this week. We want to kind of see how we're doing here in terms of helping you out and giving you as much information as possible. Other names to think about here, I mentioned playing the Jets today for your defense. Great option there. I think Howie brought that up earlier. Geronimo Allison's another interesting name. Again, this is more of a hunch that if Rodgers plays, he had that perfect strike down the right side onto Allison on Sunday Night Football last week. Devontae Adams is active. He is going to play. But again, how healthy is he? Some breaking news here now as well. Cam Meredith, the receiver for the Saints that we were very high on preseason. He's inactive again today. Probably means another start for Austin Carr, the guy from Northwestern. He had a few catches last week, but nothing to write home about just yet. Antonio Callaway, mentioned him earlier, the Browns rookie from Florida. He's going to start today outside for the Browns in New Orleans. Not outside meaning outside their stadium, outside on their line of scrimmage, outside. So expect some big plays there from him. I think he'll have the opportunity to take the top off that Saints defense. Kalen Ballage is inactive for the Dolphins, so that kind of limits your options there for the Dolphins rush game to Kenyon Drake and Frank Gore. So for any of those owners, I think Drake might now be a flex play, especially in this matchup against the Jets. the Jets did really well against the run last week, but I do think Drake has that potential for a few big plays. Jay Ajayi expected to increase his role today. Scored 2 touchdowns last week in the opener against the Falcons, so I think he has plenty of opportunity to deliver that again today in what should be a high-scoring game for the Eagles. I think they get their offense more on track today. Zach Ertz having a big day. Marcus Mariota, active. I still would not touch him. Would obviously touch Blaine Gabbert. I wouldn't touch anyone on the Titans, honestly. Corey Davis might be the only option, and that's in a yearly league. Out of desperation, I think I'm playing Derrick Henry today, but we'll see. One question that actually just came in via text, which I love. I love text message questions. Who would you rather play today? Derrick Henry as your running back 2, or James White as your running back 2, and then in your flex spot, you can either have James White and Derrick Henry, or James White and Dante Pettis, or someone along those lines. So, or Chris Hogan, for instance. He's another option that this person has, according to this text. So please let me know what your thoughts are there. If I could throw up a little poll real quick, I'd do it, but just write in your thoughts there. So the options is option 1. You got Derrick Henry as your running back, and James White as your flex. The other option is James White as your running back 2, and then either Dante Pettis or Chris Hogan as your flex. Let me know what your thoughts are. Another question from Allison. What QB do you think is most underrated, most likely to put up some surprises today? Allie, that's a great question. A very good question. As I said, Alex Smith is someone that is consistent. He's not going to turn the ball over, and the Colts stink in their secondary. So as long as the weather holds out, I'm a big fan of Smith today as an underrated option. As I mentioned earlier, I think Tyrod Taylor is going to feed Jarvis Landry the ball. I think that he is a great weapon in Njoku in the red zone as a tight end. I think the Saints defense is not going to come all the way back from that 48 points that they gave up last week, but I do think they'll have the option there to score some points. I don't think that they're going to keep. I don't think the Saints are going to keep the Browns to, let's say, 15 points. So if again we're going to think the Browns put up anywhere from 23 to 26, 7 points, Tyrod Taylor's going to get his, especially with the rushing yards there. For sure. And Nick Foles, I think that, I was proven wrong. I never in a million years thought Nick Foles was going to beat Brady in a Super Bowl. Again, I don't think that it was Brady's fault. I think it was more on the defense, obviously. But, look, Foles proved me wrong once. He proved me wrong against the Vikings last year, too, when I didn't think he was going to be able to beat that defense. But Nick Foles today on the road in Tampa Bay, I like that play a lot. Allie, great question. Zach says option 2. So that's the James White running back 2 and then flex play of either Pettis or Hogan. All right, Zach, tell me. Dante Pettis or Hogan? I love Hogan. He's my guy. He's a Pat. But last week, 1 catch, 11 yards against the Texans. And then what is he going to do today against the Jags? I don't trust it. Last year in that AFC title game, remember, it was Danny Amendola and Gronk that came up with the huge catches. Amendola is now in Miami. He's actually an option for me there too, potentially to list here to our friend who texted in this question. But for me, Hogan is a little riskier. I think Pettis gets a better matchup. I think Jimmy G actually has a better day than Brady today, which is another issue to have if you have Tom Brady. But again, thanks for that. Everyone, please weigh in again. If you think your team's going to win, give me that check mark. If that X, don't have the questions, keep coming in. Keep going through the news here. Devontae Parker, inactive again. This is actually somewhat of a surprise. He was trending towards playing for most of the week, so Tannehill's going to be down a weapon, so I wouldn't play him anyway. But again, this may be more touches for a guy we'll talk about later in Kenny Stills, who was amazing last week against the Titans. And even that guy, Danny Amendola. Again, Jets are a very tough defense, but remember something about the Jets. They gave up 17 points. They let Kenny Golladay go off last week. Golden Tate had a pretty decent night. Stafford looked awful, and he threw a bunch of interceptions. But if Tannehill's looking to move the ball in this great weather we have here in Jersey and New York, Amendola's a guy that can move the chains. He had a bunch of catches early last week. I think the game rhythm kind of got out of sync with all the delays down there last week. So maybe they get back to Amendola this week. But again, I think he's too risky of a play. Ari has a question. Should I go Crowell or Sterling Shepard half-point PPR? Great question. I like this question a lot. To me, you got to go Crowell. Shepard, I think, is kind of going to get lost in the shuffle there down in Dallas tonight. I think Beckham, Sunday Night Football, big stage. I think Beckham has a huge performance. I think Barkley, big stage, huge performance. Shepard's, though, the type of guy that could easily have 6 to 7 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown. He could. Or if they are going to key on him and stop him and Beckham, Ingram's going to have that big day. Or Barkley out of the backfield. To me, Crowell, he's going to get the ball. Whenever you have that bell cow running back with really no one behind him, he's going to get the ball. I think the Jets actually control this game from a clock standpoint. They take control of it, and I think Crowell is going to get those carries. He's going to get all the goal line work. And I think if the Jets are controlling the clock in the second half, Crowell is going to get the ball over and over and over. I like Crowell to score today. So my thought on Crowell is 80 yards and a touchdown. Shepard, 6-7 catches, 60, 70 yards, maybe a touchdown. So if you're looking half-point PPR, you're right around the same area, but I think Crowell's the guy there, especially because of the opportunity that he's definitely going to have, whereas Shepard has the other guys, Ingram, Barkley, and Beckham, ahead of him in the pecking order. Keep those questions coming. The one thing I now want to touch on is some stock down guys, and it's ironic we go right from Shepard to Eli Manning. I think he's stock down guy right now. I drafted him as my backup quarterback in my keeper league. After week 1, I was already basically sold on the fact that he's not going to be the same guy. I don't like the offensive line, which had all those kind of issues. I also don't like the chemistry that he's had so far with his receivers outside of Beckham. I'm very worried about that offensive line. I think tonight he's going to be under pressure. I think the Giants win this game. Already don't hate me. I think the Giants win this game in Dallas, but I don't think it's going to be because of Eli. I think it's going to be more about the defense stopping the Dallas offense, which I think is atrocious. So Eli stock down. Amari Cooper, this one is a head scratcher to me. He is one of the more talented receivers in the league, and he was held to 1 catch last week. Chris Hogan's one thing. I mean, he was playing against the Texans defense that was stellar, and that has always been stellar. Hogan's also not a true number 1 receiver. Amari Cooper is a number 1 receiver, and I don't care who's covering him, whether it's Marcus Peters or Aqib Talib or whomever. He's got to get more than 1 catch. I think Gruden had some comments about him this week. I think that's going to motivate him, if anything. But for now, stock down on Amari Cooper, who I would not play in DFS. I'd certainly obviously play him in yearly. You invested a high pick on him, you got to play him. Russell Wilson, I hate to do this because I think Wilson's one of the more exciting players in this league. But when you have your best playmaker on offense, Doug Baldwin, go out when he's going to be out for a few weeks now with another knee issue, you have to be stocked down on Wilson. Yes, he gets you points from his rushing attempts. Yes, he gets you the rushing touchdowns occasionally. But when your best weapons outside at receiver are Brandon Marshall and Tyler Lockett, you're going to have to find better options out there. Yes, the running game should be okay with Chris Carson and Rashad Penny. I like those guys. Again, they haven't separated themselves yet. Pete Carroll said, yeah, Chris Carson did a better job. He's earned more carries, but let's see it before we believe in it. I have stock down on Russell Wilson. I don't think his matchup this week's even good. Going into Chicago, you saw what Chicago did last week for the first half and a quarter, I guess, 3 quarters against Rodgers. I think the Bears defense at home, they're going to be motivated. They got Khalil Mack. I think Russell Wilson stock down for me this week. He's someone that I would look to avoid in most any format. The Tennessee offense is something that I already touched on. They're a hot mess, as my son would like to say. Hot mess. Tennessee, we don't know who's playing quarterback. The rushing game looked inept. Corey Davis was in and out of the lineup, banged up. Rashard Matthews, great. Delaney Walker's out. Stay away. The last guy on this list is LaShawn McCoy. I think that LaShawn McCoy is a very talented back, but until Josh Allen or Nathan Peterman, and I'm not going to hope we ever see Nathan Peterman ever again, no offense to you, Mr. Peterman, until Josh Allen proves himself, is LaShawn McCoy the type of guy that in a DFS league you're going to really key on and have play? Now look, the Chargers gave up a boatload of points and yards to the Chiefs last week, but one guy that did not go off was Kareem Hunt. It was the other guys. It was Tyreek Hill and a bunch of those other playmakers that they have. Hunt was okay, but McCoy is going to be bottled up. They're going to key on him. They're going to let Allen beat them. So for me, of course, in a year league, he's probably your first or second round pick. You got to play McCoy. But for me, the play here is to stay away from him, try to trade him, and certainly don't play him in DFS. There's some more questions coming in. Do you know of any other conference where every team in the conference has won a Super Bowl? I'd have to do some research on that one. So I'll get back to you, Mr. Carnot. I'll get back to you on that one. But yeah, thanks for the trivia question. Zach, if only INTs counted positively for QBs, Eli would be at the top. Zach, those words are beautiful. As someone that has written a column that's been published about the fact that I don't think Eli's a Hall of Famer, I agree with you. I don't think Eli's a Hall of Famer because I don't think the 2 Super Bowls he won, yes, they were against the Pats, and I'm bitter about it, yada, yada, yada. He did not win those Super Bowls. The defense did. Steve Spagnuolo in that defensive system that he ran against both the Pats teams, that the undefeated season and the other season that they beat them in the rematch, those were all on the defense who won those titles. I'm not an Eli believer. I think he's good. I think he's a compiler. He is that start streak that ended last year when they put Geno Smith in. I think it's just he's a compiler. He's a very good quarterback. I think he's been middle of the road. I will actually post to this show thread later on my article on Eli Manning and why he's not a Hall of Famer, and why someone like Phillip Rivers, for instance, is someone that I actually think is a Hall of Famer ahead of him. And then we got Drew Brees or Deshaun Watson. Got to run with Drew Brees here. I like Watson's ability here today against the Titans, but got to remember something. The Titans are a good defensive unit. They gave up a couple touchdowns last week to Kenny Stills. I think they got out of sorts a little bit with that those couple delays down in Miami. But Drew Brees is Drew Brees, especially in that dome. He was electric last week, for a whole bunch of yards. You got Kamara coming out of the backfield. You got Mike Thomas. Ted Ginn's now a playmaker again. Who knows what the situation is going to be with a guy like Austin Carr, but I think he's got a ton of weapons. You got to roll with Drew Brees. Any home game, I'm not benching Drew Brees. Deshaun Watson, if we're talking DFS and streaming value, I'm a little weary on Deshaun Watson. Hopefully the rust came off last week against the Pats, but the guy hasn't played football in about a year. Yes, he played some in the preseason, but Hopkins is a little hobbled this week. He's going to play. Will Fuller is back this week for the Texans against the Titans. But to me, the concern is the rust for Deshaun Watson. So for me, Drew Brees is the answer. Let's take a look at some other news and notes. Carson Wentz on track for Week 3 return. Guess what, Nick Foles? Today's your day to prove it. Especially if Wentz is coming back next week. I think he's the type of guy that you will want to have in your lineup, Foles, today. And then Wentz, hopefully for those owners that kept him in a yearly league or drafted him in a yearly league, will have Wentz, who was really playing at an MVP level last year, back next week. So that was a little stock down. Some guys to keep an eye on today as we kind of go through the games today. Jordy Nelson. This is concerning because I love Nelson. When he became a free agent, when the Packers cut him, I wanted the Pats to sign him once they lost Amendola. Maybe the Packers were onto something because last week he sure looked done in that Raiders Monday night loss against the Rams. He looked done, stepped slow. Hopefully he gets back on track because he's one of my favorite players to watch. He's had a very, very productive career, and I hope that continues. Ted Ginn Jr., someone we just mentioned for the Saints, scored again last week. I think with Cam Meredith not being in the lineup for the Saints, this actually helps Ginn a lot. Great wide receiver 3 play, huge upside. The Browns did give up a bunch of yards and a couple touchdowns last week to the Steelers in that rainstorm. Now they're in a dome. I think Drew Brees and the Saints, to Ari's point before, are going to put up over 30 points. So to me, that's a really good matchup this week for Ted Ginn as a wide receiver 3, especially in DFS where his salary's probably a little cheap. Kenny Stills had a couple scores last week for the Dolphins. He's clearly their main guy. I loved him coming into the year. I wanted to get him in my keeper league. Couldn't get him. Couldn't pry him away from the other owner. And sure enough, the other owner had 2 touchdowns last week from Stills. I'm going to jump over Dalton for a second, and I want to get into the Arizona quarterbacks. And the reason I mention it here is simply because I don't think Sam Bradford's the long-term answer. Obviously, I think that's going to be Josh Rosen. And the way they looked last week against the Redskins made me think that change is going to come sooner rather than later. The Cardinals are in a terrible spot today against the Rams, home opener. My gut says Josh Rosen plays next week. Sam Bradford was awful last week. No chemistry without anyone outside of Larry Fitzgerald. They got to get their rushing game going. David Johnson's a stud. I think Rosen provides a lot more upside for that offense. I bet you, my prediction, bold prediction number 1, Josh Rosen is your quarterback for the Cardinals next week. And then Andy Dalton. He looked amazing. Again,
big toss. Dalton to his right, end zone. Touchdown, A.J. Green.
In this game, I think that he was short even Tyler Boyd, the ex-Pittsburgh Panther wide receiver that was drafted there. He had a huge day. Joe Mixon, who's now hurt, we'll touch on him in a second. He had another good night. The Ravens defense completely shut down the Bills, and then here comes Andy Dalton, who has many doubters in this league. And sure enough, look what happened. He lit it up, 4 touchdowns in that first half. They held on to win and cover the spread. Thank you very much. Want to know this week? This was a great play by A.J. Green. Showed off his skills here. But again, Dalton had a great performance. So I think he's a guy that moving forward is definitely someone to keep an eye on. He gets the Panthers next week. Decent matchup. Let's see how the Panthers do today as they travel to play Matt Ryan. Because, look, Dak Prescott and that Cowboys offense is terrible. I don't think that was a true test for the Panthers defense last week. Let's see how Matt Ryan and those weapons, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, do this week. And then we can make an assessment on Dalton. But again, I think he's a guy that through 2 weeks of the season, MVP candidate. Again, 2 weeks, hot take right there. But again, who's had a better start than Andy Dalton? 2 wins, huge divisional win. Now they're 2-0. And maybe next week 3-0 for the Panthers. So question here from Allison. 49ers or Jaguars defense? Allison, you know me. Am I really going to take the Jaguars defense to stop the Patriots? Nope. So give me the 49ers. I think regardless, I'm going to take the 49ers. I think Matt Stafford had a really off week, now short week, going out to the West Coast to play the 49ers. I like Stafford, obviously, for the year, but in this matchup, he threw a bunch of bad balls the other night. One was returned for a touchdown. So give me the 49ers defense. They held the Vikings to, I think it was 23 points last week. I think the Jaguars are going to be in a bit of trouble here because I don't think Blake Bortles is going to be able to beat the Pats. I think without Fournette and that threat in the backfield that they're going to be able to move the ball. So maybe some turnovers, some short fields for the Patriots. And you know what? Tom Brady always delivers. I would not be surprised if the Pats lose this game again this week. I was actually surprised that they beat the Texans last week. But again, I think that they now have tape on the Jaguars from last year and how they attacked them in the title game. I think they'll attack the defense a different way. I think this is a huge matchup for both teams. Potential AFC title game rematch preview. But again, I'll take the 49ers defense there as well. So keep those questions coming. It's 12:25, so we only have half hour left. I mean, you guys are going to miss me. Once the show's over, you'll miss me. But you could, of course, always text me. And here's just some footage, too. I wanted to touch on something with Kenny Stills from last week. You could see him here, great move to get to the outside and then obviously hit the pylon for the touchdown. This was second quarter. The offense was stagnant. They have a bunch of other options at receiver, and there's Amendola. Again, Tannehill's got to work that short yardage game. So for those people that have Stills or are considering him as a DFS option, I certainly think he's one to take a look at this week. Look at it. I mean, great timing here. Stills catches the ball in traffic. He was an electric receiver when he was at Oklahoma in college, and he's done nothing but that over the last year or so here. Big play here. I didn't even know Tannehill could throw the ball that long, but sure enough, Stills is there for the touchdown catch. This pretty much sealed the game last week for the Dolphins, but he's definitely someone to take a look at in all leagues this week. I think he's going to end up being the number one receiver for the Dolphins and end up having, I would say, between 6, 7, 8 touchdowns. Good start with him having 2 there as well. Before we get into the game picks for this week, which I know everyone is high on, and I'm trying to look at here any other breaking news. We have Aaron Rodgers wearing a large brace on his knee. Who cares? I mean, Aaron Rodgers is like the Ben Roethlisberger of quarterbacks, in which they can not play and be on the moon for the week. If they show up on Sunday, he's going to give you his best effort. To me, though, DFS, you stay away. High price tag, high risk. Euro League, look, long season. He may throw for a couple touchdowns, but remember this, too. He's going up against one of the best, if not the best, defense in the entire NFL. They shut down Jimmy G last week, and outside of the game, that Foles had last year in the NFC title game, they're a pretty stout defense. So, for me, find a safer option than Aaron Rodgers. He's someone that I would steer clear of this week. Again, keep your questions coming in for me, and we'll get to the gambling picks right now. If you think your team's going to win today, your fantasy team, give me a check mark. Give me some score predictions for your games. X if you think you're going to lose, Y you're going to lose, and we'll try to help you within the next half hour. And then also we'll do some game picks. So let's dive right in to Week 2 game picks. Start off with the Bengals. I went back and forth on that game Thursday afternoon, and I finally said to myself, home game for Andy Dalton. Let's hope he proves it again, and certainly he did. He was great last Thursday night, as we all saw, and we just saw some of those highlights. He was great. So I would certainly play Dalton going forward, too, in fantasy, as we just mentioned. So Minnesota, the line's TBD. Now that Rodgers is active, I can jump on and get the line. It was -1 for the Packers before it got taken down. No matter what it is, I'm taking Minnesota. I think they're going to go on the road and win. I think that they'll be able to control Rodgers. I think they'll be able to score some points on the Packers' defense. So give me the Vikings. Someone could jump online and throw me out the spread, but whatever it is, I think now it'd probably be even pick 'em or a point maybe for the Packers. I'll give me the Vikings. Marshall, thank you for joining. The Redskins -6. As I've said, I think Alex Smith manages this game. I think the defense shuts down the inexperienced Colts running game, no matter who's back there. I think they take T.Y. Hilton out of that game, and I would go with Washington there -6. Atlanta -5.5. They looked awful on offense, especially in the red zone. Cost us a game last week against the Eagles when we took the Falcons to cover that spread. But I do like them against Carolina. Matt Ryan seems to play well against the Panthers. I think at home, even without Devontae Freeman, I think that's a win for the Falcons outright, and I think it's probably going to be 6-7 point game. All my predictions are up on the Watch Phantom website as well as in the fantasy forum for exact score predictions as well. Philly -3. Best bet number 1 for me this week. I just cannot see Tampa Bay, and I know the Fitzpatrick haters are going to come at me, or the Fitzpatrick lovers, I should say, are going to come at me. Well, you saw what he did last week. What about this week? I don't think that Fitzmagic is going to have another big week. I do like that Foles, has another start under his belt. He's back healthier now than he was in the preseason. I think the loss of Hargraves in the back secondary is a big blow. I don't think Deshaun Jackson's 100%. So for me, I'm going to roll with Philly. Best bet number 1. Best bet number 2 is the Chargers. I think that they are very down after they lost last week to Patrick Mahomes and the Steelers, to the Chiefs. I like the Chargers on the road. Yes, there's that whole myth about the West Coast teams coming east and covering spreads. Over the last few years, that record has actually flip-flopped, where the teams coming west actually have a winning record on the East Coast. And this is the Bills. Did anyone watch that game last week? How the game's only 7.5, I don't know. I think obviously, you got to give the home team a couple points, but I think this is a blowout. I think the Chargers have way too much talent. And their defense, even without Bosa, is going to stop the Bills and Josh Allen in his NFL starting debut. And the Chiefs, plus 4.5 and over 53. Fantasy bonanza. I think this game's got points all over the place. If you got a Chief, you got a Steeler, you're playing them. The only problem for me is the Steelers' tight end position could be a lucrative, small money, DFS, sneaky, yearly play. But with Vance McDonald back in the fold and healthy and playing, him and Jesse James, we don't know what's going to happen there in terms of the target share and workload. So let's take a week off from them. But everyone else, Connor, Roethlisberger, Juju, Antonio Brown, they're all playing for you. Mahomes, Hunt, Kelsey, Watkins, Tyreek Hill, all these guys are playing for you. So for me, you got to play both the options fantasy bonanza. I actually like the Chiefs. I like what I saw a lot better from them last week, going on the road and beating the Chargers and really having that game in control, whereas the Steelers choked the game away to Cleveland. They should have held that fourth quarter lead. Yes, it was raining. Yes, the conditions were sloppy. Ben's a little banged up. He's always banged up, but if he's even not 100%, I like the Chiefs to cover that spread. I think that the Steelers actually win the game, but I think 4.5 is too much. And the over, bonanza time. I think this hits in the 60s. I think 34-30, 33-30, somewhere around there. This game is going to go well over 53. If not, I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm going to be wrong in this one. And the Jets. It really, really pains me to make this prediction, but the Jets last week showed me something on offense. Sam Darnold was very impressive after that first throw in the pick six. Robbie Anderson's a weapon. I think Jermaine Kearse is solid. He's coming back. You got Anunwa, who he seems to have a very good chemistry with. Crowell out of the backfield, as Ari had asked us about earlier. I like the Jets here. I don't like the Dolphins. I think that their Week 1 game was an aberration in their win. I think they're going to have a 5-11 season. So give me the Jets -3 in this game, and they're going to go 2-0. Obviously, if you have questions on this or insight for your gambling picks, certainly drop them in the comments section as well. And remember, you think your team's going to win this week, give me a check mark or an X for not. I think that the Jets are in a very interesting spot because they're going to start to peak, and they've already taken over a lot of that New York airwave in terms of the publicity that they're getting now around Sam Darnold and taking over New York. It's painful as I have to drive around here as a Pats fan, but look, Darnold and the defense played exceptionally well last week, so we'll roll with them for this week as well. Taking a look at the other picks, Cleveland plus 9.5. This one I actually was very close to switching based on the Josh Gordon news last night, because how is this going to affect the team? My guess is the team and Hugh Jackson met last night. They walked through this and talked about it. I also don't know what the Saints defense is going to give us. They were a 9-point favorite last week and got lost by 8 to the Bucs. So give me this week the Browns and the 9.5, hoping they cover that one. Houston is my best bet, number 3. I don't know how they are an underdog in Tennessee. They, I guess, must think that these teams are evenly matched. Even if this was -2 to Houston, I'm taking Houston any day of the week. I don't like the Mariota news, which I just see here. He's wearing a glove on the field during warmups. I mean, seriously, like, Blaine Gabbert's the other option, so I guess you can't, there's really no winner here, but give me the Texans, even without Jadeveon Clowney today. The Rams, -12.5. I don't think, again, that the Cardinals, who I think are going to go to Josh Rosen next week, are going to compete here with the Rams. I think this is a blowout. I'm thinking something like 41-17, 33-10, something along those lines. I think the Rams are going to have way too much here, and I think this game's over at halftime. San Francisco -6. Big day for Jimmy G. I want to see him get back on track after his performance last week with 3 interceptions against the Vikings. Stafford struggled in week 1 against the Jets, going on the road, cross-country trip. We'll see how that goes, but I do think that the 49ers, with their solid defense, held the Vikings to 23 last week. They held Stafford in check, and they win this game by a touchdown. New England -1.5. Homer pick for me, sure, but I do think that the Patriots are going to learn more from the AFC title game than the Jags will learn from their game against the Pats. Reason being, they know how the Jaguars defense is going to try to attack them, and even if they switch, they know that switch is coming, and they'll react. I don't think the Jags with Fournette are as formidable, certainly. I think their wide receiving core is lackluster. So to me, the Patriots have the edge on offense, going up against that defense, who again is banged up. And actually, another piece of news here is Calais Campbell, huge player for the Jaguars, is questionable, and many people on site are saying he's not going to play. So if Calais Campbell's out and Fournette's out, this is a huge advantage for the Patriots. So give me the Pats -1.5. I think Burkhead and Michelle will sprinkle in, but I think James White will be the feature guy there. The key guy here to me, though, is Chris Hogan. I want to see him get off the schneid. 1 catch for 11 yards last week. needs to have some separation there. Amendola was that guy last year. Maybe it's Burkhead this year, but I think the Pats win this game by 5 or 6. Giants +3. I love the Giants in this spot. I hate the Dallas offense. I think they're very overrated. I think Dak is under hot water there in Dallas, and Ari could certainly jump in and tell us that during the week. I think there's a lot of fire on Jason Garrett. There's a lot of turmoil there. So give me the Giants +3 Sunday night. I think Beckham has a huge game under the bright lights in Jerry's world. Denver -6. I like this pick here. I just don't like the Raiders and the mentality that they're going into this game with. I think there's infighting already over the Khalil Mack situation. Amari Cooper, Derek Carr, they're getting thrown under the bus by John Gruden. I like the Broncos. I like the game at altitude early in the season. The players aren't in the best shape. I like the weapons for the Broncos at receiver going up against those Raiders cornerbacks. So give me the Broncos. And Monday Night Football, I loved what I saw from the Bears in the first half last week. I was shocked to turn on the game almost at halftime and see that they were up, regardless of Rodgers' injury or not. I like that defense. I think they're motivated now with Khalil Mack. I think they're building some identity on offense around Trubisky and Jordan Howard. And you got Allen Robinson, who made a few catches last week. I think Trey Burton gets a lot more involved tomorrow night. And the Seahawks traveling again, cross-country, primetime game, no Doug Baldwin, no established star at running back. Russell Wilson might have to be forced to do a couple things, and that's a good defense. So give me the Bears to win that game, let's say by a touchdown or so. Some more questions coming in. This is Jack Chase. Is Sam Darnold going to have a great game, or will the defense win it for the Jets? Jack, great question. I do think that Darnold here is going to put up a couple touchdowns. I think the Dolphins secondary is susceptible to the long ball. So I do think that a guy like Robbie Anderson might have a touchdown today. I think Anun will have a bunch of catches, let's say 6-7 catches. I do think the key, though, to this game is going to be the Jets defense. The Jets defense played amazing last Monday night. They have to go on a short week now against the Dolphins. But again, I think Tannehill is not a great quarterback. So to me, the Jets can take advantage of that. The running game is really nothing to speak for. I do think, though, the key to this game is going to be early on establishing the run with Crowell, even more than Darnold. I think that if they establish the run, which the Titans couldn't do against the Dolphins last week, we saw what Derrick Henry did or didn't do for that matter. I think if the Jets establish the running game against the Dolphins with Crowell, that'll open things up for Darnold. They'll control the clock. They'll force Tannehill to look at the scoreboard and say, okay, we got 10-point deficit. We got to hurry up into some mistakes. So I think Crowell's the key, and that's why I mentioned to Ari before to start Crowell. I think that's a really good play there, and I think the Jets are going to win and go to 2-0, and you're going to be running around your house thrilled that the Jets are now 2-0. And if they lose, I'll be happy, but whatever. You'll still love me anyway. All right, so other news coming in at this hour, Josh Gordon not facing another ban, according to Jay Glazer, which is great to hear. If this is more related to his hamstring and what happened off the field at this promotional shoot, that's great news for Josh Gordon and potential suitors of his, that he's not facing another substance abuse ban. And to me, again, the teams, to recap our kind of top story here, Josh Gordon is going to be traded or released by the Browns early this week, as early as possibly as tomorrow. He's potentially identified teams like the 49ers and Cowboys as teams that he would be interested in. I don't think it's a great fit in Dallas. I do think it's a better fit in San Francisco. If the Browns trade him, supposedly they are not going to trade him into the AFC. Understandable. With the Pats there is a potential option. The Colts is a potential option. To me, if I'm Josh Gordon, I take a step back. And I say, all right, I've been in Cleveland for all these years. They've supported me all these years. Certainly something happened here that upset them. They want to move on. They don't want this distraction. I totally get it. But for me with Josh Gordon, if I'm Josh Gordon right now, I say, what's the best situation? It's not the Cowboys. If the Cowboys tonight lose to the Giants and are 0-2, there's enough craziness going on there. That'll just add to the zoo. The 49ers are an intriguing option because I do like where their offense is going. They have a great quarterback that's up and coming in an NFC conference that is loaded. I think that's a competitive nature of me and Josh Gordon. Maybe he goes to the 49ers. I think if opportunity presents itself, the Patriots are certainly an intriguing option because of their winning culture with Belichick, with Brady. But again, if you're thinking long-term for a guy like Gordon, maybe it's Jimmy G or a guy like Andrew Luck. And I don't discount the connection for Irsay and Gordon. Gordon's the type of guy that likes to be coddled a little bit. He's got to be able to relate to his coach. And if your owner is someone that's overcome substance abuse, that certainly is a nice little foundation to have to breed success for yourself in your career. So Josh Gordon, best of luck to you, and hope you get up back on the field really soon. Keep those questions coming here as we kind of roll on. We are about 20 minutes from kickoff, so we can immediately go into some bold predictions. My first bold prediction involves this guy who is going to come up on the screen right now, Patrick Mahomes. I think between him and Ben Roethlisberger, they're going to go for well over 600 passing yards in this game. Fantasy bonanza time. Mahomes, I'm actually regretting already letting him go in my keeper league for a draft pick, and then having Brady, because I think Mahomes showed last week, and look at this explosive nature of Tyreek Hill here. He was electric. Punt return, touchdown reception. They just put up so many points last week against a good Chargers defense, and Mahomes just got a cannon for an arm. I think him and Big Ben are just going to certainly have huge days here. Great catch here by Tyreek Hill. I mean, what a weapon this guy is to have on your team on the outside. So certainly I think that's one prediction we'll have, them going over 650 yards. I think the Cowboys, the Seahawks, the Colts, and the Titans all are going to start 0-2. So that means that the Giants, the Bears, the Redskins, and the Houston Texans are all going to win today. Not many people were high on teams like the Colts and even maybe the Seahawks at the beginning of the season, but the Cowboys to go 0-2, not expected. The Titans go 0-2 based on their success last year getting to the divisional round of the playoffs. New head coach, Derrick Henry now the feature back. Again, very scary for them right now if they're going to start the season 0-2 and potentially be without Mariota in the offense there. New England, Philly, Minnesota, Denver, and the Jets to all start 2-0. Again, the Patriots had a very hard early 2 weeks. They had the Texans and the Jaguars. But if they are now going to go up against the Calais Campbell and Leonard Fournette-less Jaguars team, they could go 2-0 with a rematch against their old defensive coordinator Matt Patricia next Sunday night. So they could go 2-0. I think Philly goes down to Tampa and wins that game. Minnesota, as we talked about, I mean, this is a great game. Packers and Vikings, bitter rivalry. Rodgers back on the field, but I do think the Vikings win. Denver's a nice surprise story. If they could start 2-0 in that AFC West where, the Chiefs and the Chargers are going to trade blows all year, what we thought, but if Case Keenum could get them off to do 2-0 start, that's pretty nice. And then the Jets. If the Jets start 2-0, especially with that shocking win against the Lions on Monday night, great story in New York, but I'll have to turn off my radio. Another bold prediction here. I think Case Keenum throws more touchdown passes today than Russell Wilson. All about matchups. Wilson has no outside receiver outside of Tyler Lockett. If Brandon Marshall's your best weapon, and then he's going to go play in Chicago, where he's going to probably be distracted in his return to Chicago, as he used to be a Bear, I think the Bears defense shuts Wilson down. I think Case Keenum throws for another 3 touchdowns today. I mean, his weapons are much better than Wilson, playing at home in the altitude against a Raiders defense that isn't great. Give me Case Keenum to throw more touchdowns, and I think this is a hopeful prediction for me as much as it is a bold prediction. Randall Cobb leads the Green Bay Packers in receptions today. We saw what happened last week. Devontae Adams, is banged up. He's not 100%. So you got him out there. He's more of a big play touchdown guy, red zone guy. I think Cobb's that security blanket. He had a few catches last week, had that really long 75-yard touchdown to really, give them the lead last week. So to me, Randall Cobb, bold prediction, he's going to take that, really in stride there. And more on the Vikings here, I think, someone kind of texted me about a question about the Vikings, and I'll show some highlights from their game last week here against the 49ers. Their defense and their ability to control the ball here with the play action pass are really their 2 keys. The defense, especially for the Packers, is going to have to control Dalvin Cook, who's a beast, and you can see him catching the ball out of the backfield. But how are they going to react to Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs and Kyle Rudolph, as you can see here with Thielen catching the pass over the middle? How are they going to be able to react to that? The Bears certainly had hit some plays early on to get the lead in that game. I like Kirk Cousins on the road. Like, this is one of those games that you need him to step up. This is why you signed him to that lucrative contract. Of course, he got sacked there. But again, they are just a punishing defensive unit. Jimmy G, made some mistakes last week. Not there as he completed that one to Pierre Garçon. But to me, the Vikings are just a total team here. I think they're going to be the favorite to come out of the NFC and get to the Super Bowl. So for me, the Vikings are that team this week to keep an eye on, start 2-0 out of the NFC. And eventually, I think, meet the Rams in the title game, which is a very common prediction. How many TDs for Jacob Mankuta this afternoon in flag football? I need to take a drink for this one. Thank you for the question. My prediction is 1. Very competitive league out here in New York. My son's debut flag football game today. Saw the practice yesterday. It was a little sluggish. Looked a little bit like the Jets under Mark Sanchez or Geno Smith. But we'll see. I'm optimistic. He's got his soccer game first, so hopefully get a couple goals, ease him right into the football game. But our key is football game right to the Jags-Pats at 4 o'clock. But thank you for that question, Howie. This is Ellis Jason. How is Rodgers' knee? Good start versus their Norris Division rivals. Ellis, there's no way you knew what Norris Division meant. Your dad probably taught you that word, but great question nonetheless. Rodgers' knee is not 100%. As I mentioned earlier in the show, this type of injury could probably take a month to recover from, as reported earlier today. He's going to play. I think long term, got to see how the Packers season goes here. Maybe there's a week that it's a down week. It's, they're playing a lesser opponent. They sit him down. They don't have a great option behind them, as we saw last week with DeShone Kizer. So for me, Rodgers is going to play. He's not someone I would play in my yearly league or my daily league this week. Because again, who knows how he's going to be getting around with that large brace on his knee. Too risky of a play for me. This is the type of thing that sounds to me like if it wasn't the Vikings, if it was the Bucs or someone like that, he would be sitting today. So for me, Ellis, I would be benching Aaron Rodgers. It's blasphemy as the number one quarterback in this league, but there are safer options out there. But great question, buddy. For anyone else that has questions as we kind of go through here, I'm here to answer those questions. I do have some more coming in, and we will kind of tee those up right now. Better long-term keeper option, Michael Gallup, Cortland Sutton, Traquan Smith, or Dante Pettis? This is a great question because for those in keeper leagues that may already have a loss or will have an extra spot on their bench, I think keepers and big-time options, especially at receiver, can be really helpful. In my league for years, Odell Beckham, he didn't have he was drafted late and he's moved up and now he's a keeper, but he was a guy that's drafted in the teens. You have a guy like Jordy Nelson or Julian Edelman that comes back from an injury, they're a late round guy that you could potentially keep. And these guys, Gallup and Sutton and Traquan and Dante Pettis, are all decent options. The way I would rank them right now is Traquan would go fourth. I want to see him do something for the Saints. He's got an opportunity to do it now with Cam Meredith missing the last 2 weeks. So he certainly has an option. He is an option. He had a very nice preseason, but again, keep an eye on him. He would go number 4. Cortland Sutton would come in at number 3 for me. He had a couple catches last week for the Broncos, but hey, those 2 stud receivers in front of him are only going to be target monsters. They have Royce Freeman out of the backfield. They have Philip Lindsay coming out of the backfield. I think Sutton, after this year, is a guy you'd want to hold on to as the Broncos may look to move one of those talented receivers. Pettis would be number 2 for me. And the reason I say that is he's explosive. He could return punts and kicks. Garcon is not getting any younger. Goodwin's already banged up. So the opportunity exists there for Pettis, who scored last week against that Viking defense, to play and really do well. And then number 1 for me is Michael Gallup. I think he is a guy for the Cowboys, unless they bring in a guy like Josh Gordon. That's eventually this year going to be that number 1 receiver. Who knows if Dak's going to be able to get him the ball consistently. But you know what? Des Bryant was a viable option for Dak when they had a solid running game. Hopefully they get that offensive line healthy. They develop the running game again with Elliott, and then Gallup is used to the best of his abilities. But I think he's the number 1 guy there. Continue to have those questions come in. Another question. This one comes from the West Coast again. I'm assuming from Mr. Ross Mankuta out in LA. Thank you for chiming in. The top 5 fantasy quarterbacks for 2019. I mean, we're 1 week into the season. We're talking about 2019 already, but here we go. Number 5, Jared Goff. I think that Goff moving forward, he's going to have the second year in the Sean McVay offense. You got Brandon Cooks. You got all the other weapons. Gurley out of the backfield. Robert Woods. Cooper Kupp. They got a tight end in Higbee that's pretty good. I think, given the weapons around him, Goff's my number 5 guy next year. Number 4, give me Brady next year as number 4. I think they're going to develop the running game this year with Sony Michel once he gets back and healthy. I think Brady another year older. Who knows what the receiving core is going to look like. Maybe they add Josh Gordon. Maybe Gronk's traded, as they've kind of alluded to. He rejected a trade supposedly in the offseason this year. So give me Brady at 4. Drew Brees at number 3. He's not going anywhere as long as he's playing those games in New Orleans and he's got weapons like Kamara and Thomas and Ingram when he comes back from suspension. He'll be number 3. Number 2 for me is Aaron Rodgers. Again, this is how many years in a row now that Rodgers has gotten hurt in some capacity and missed some time. I just don't trust him. He's not getting any younger. I think Devontae Adams is a good receiver, but let's see one of the other guys like Cobb reestablish himself or Geronimo Allison establish himself. And the running game still is a work in progress. Jamal Williams wasn't great last week. Maybe Aaron Jones is the guy when he comes back. But to me, Rodgers number 2 and number 1 is no surprise after what he did last week is Pat Mahomes. I think you got to look at skill set and weapons, and he's got them all. He's got the biggest arm, the 80-yard pass that everyone has seen on YouTube. He's got Hunt, he's got Kelsey, he's got Hill, he's got Watkins. Maybe they draft another receiver. But for me, Patrick Mahomes already has shown me that he could be the number 1 quarterback next year, especially given his age, his mobility. He can scramble. He scored a bunch of rushing touchdowns at Texas Tech when he was there. I like Mahomes number 1 next year in terms of my quarterback. So we are now about 10 minutes away from kickoff. So we are blasting through this show. No additional news here. But here there are two more updates. Blaine Gabbert warming up with the first string offense for the Titans against the Texans. So again, this is a situation to stay away from, if anything. And this is a great idea. Last second, if you want to pay up for a defense in DFS, that's a defense to pay up on is the Texans. I'm big on them today. Martavis Bryant, oh boy, more news from him. But he was suspended for a year, but he's playing on appeal. So for those of you who reinvested in Martavis Bryant after he came back from suspension, or came back after being released by the Raiders, I would dump him because he most likely will be out again for a year. And for those, I'll kind of run through my DFS and yearly lineups here, and we can talk about that over the last 10 minutes. DFS lineup today: Patrick Mahomes, no surprise. Kamara, Tevin Coleman, I talked about him earlier. He's going to get all the carries and receptions for the Falcons' backfield, unless someone vultures one at the goal line. So give me Tevin Coleman. Antonio Brown against the Chiefs in what should be a fantasy bonanza. So give me the top running back, the top wide receiver. I love Emmanuel Sanders. He played really well last week. Had good chemistry with Case Keenum. He's a play for me. Jarvis Landry, huge opportunity today with no Josh Gordon in the dome. Good weather. Tyrod Taylor's, good chemistry with him. He had a bunch of catches last week. George Kittle, the tight end, and probably best receiver now for the 49ers with Marquise Goodwin out. He had a bunch of yards last week. I think it was 90 against the Vikings. Let's see him do that again this week against the Lions. James White, I think, again, bell cow for the Patriots. Might not be on the ground, might be out of the backfield. I think he's going to have a huge game. And this pains me. The New York Jets. The only reason I'm taking the Jets this week and their defense is their low price on DFS. So if you look at the team all around, I think Mahomes is going to have a huge week in that bonanza game against the Steelers. So decent salary quarterback. Kamara and Antonio Brown, very high at their positions. Tevin Coleman, a value play. Sanders and Landry, mid-tier but solid receivers. Kittle, mid-tier. White, mid-tier. And save some money there on the Jets. I think I finished 6 out of 12 last week in my fantasy DFS league with my college buddies, so hopefully we have some more luck there. Chris Hogan, thanks for killing me last week, buddy. For my yearly league, a little down week for me because of the injuries and some things in... especially with Hogan playing against the Jags. But we have Brady, who I do think is going to have a decent day. I think he'll score 2 touchdowns, throw 2 touchdowns. I think they'll win the game. Do I think he's going to throw for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns? No. Would that be nice? Of course. I got AJ Green, who already went off, 3 touchdowns. Thank you, AJ. Randall Cobb, who I mentioned earlier. Kenny Galladay, who went off against the Jets. Hopefully that translates in the game against the Niners. Todd Gurley, Derrick Henry, because truly, this is one that I may have to update my lineup. Thanks for Zach for giving me your opinion there. So Henry potentially will come out for James White. Ricky Seals-Jones, the tight end for the Cardinals. I just got dealt the Delaney Walker blow. What made that worse was I just a week before the season started traded Marvin Jones of the Lions for Delaney Walker because I needed a tight end. Thank you, Jay Amsterdam. Shout out to you for trading me Delaney Walker and then him being out for the year. So Ricky Seals-Jones at tight end, James White at flex, and I had the Ravens defense. Yuck against the Bengals the other night. So we are 8 minutes from the 1 o'clock games kicking off. Certainly, please hit me back with any more questions. We'll run through the game picks one more time as we kind of wrap up here. We got Cincinnati won already on Thursday night, so we're 1-0. The Vikings, the Redskins, the Falcons. And then my best bets, the Eagles, the Chargers, Kansas City, and the over. I think the over is the easier play here because I just think that we're going to see a ton of points. You got the Jets at -3, which again really pains me. Some later action, including some of the other games at 1 o'clock. Cleveland, Houston, best bet, especially now that it looks like Blaine Gabbert's going to be the guy under center today for the Titans. We got the Rams, the 49ers, the Pats, the Giants, Broncos, and Bears. Some things to kind of keep a look out for next week, as I was kind of touching on that, is, the teams looking forward. Who's going to be 2-0? Who's going to be 0-2? What kind of chemistry are the teams developing that are 2-0? Are the 0-2 teams in trouble? I think either the Giants or the Cowboys are going to be under the microscope next week. One of them is going to be 0-2. I think the Steelers, if they lose at home today to the Chiefs, people are going to start looking at that team too, especially given the Le'Veon Bell situation, despite the fact James Conner played admirably well last week. Because if they're 0-1-1 with a tie at Cleveland and a loss at home to Kansas City, who knows what's going to happen there. Let's also see Russell Wilson tomorrow night. If they start 0-2 and they don't look good tomorrow night and the weapons are around them, maybe there's some internal strife there. Maybe Pete Carroll gets on the hot seat even. Let's take a look at the Falcons next week. The Panthers go into Atlanta this week. If Atlanta lays another egg like they did in Philadelphia, there's going to be a lot of talk there about Matt Ryan and whether he's overrated and all these other things and how the offense is run. Because last week they had how many plays down at the goal line and couldn't get it in. So that's something big there. Let's also touch on the Jaguars. If they win this week, undermanned against the Patriots, at home. Are they the class of the AFC? Potentially. But other teams that will obviously look at the Redskins. If they can beat the Colts today, they're off to a 2-0 start. Going into Arizona winning, beating Andrew Luck today, that might not be bad, especially with the Cowboys or Giants being 0-2, the other being 1-1, that if the Eagles ever lost, the Redskins can be in first by themselves at the end of the day today. I think them and the Eagles will be 2-0, though, going into next week. The Patriots, I'll jump back to them with the Detroit. If Detroit goes to San Francisco and starts 0-2 with all the news out there about Matt Patricia and the team already not liking his style of coaching, can you imagine that Patriots team on Sunday Night Football going into Detroit to face Patricia and an 0-2 Lions team that already is under chaos? That would have storylines written up the yin-yang. And one preview, next week, we're going to potentially have a surprise celebrity guest pick on his birthday, a couple games. I'm going to bring him in here potentially to give some of his game picks next Sunday. It's his birthday, and then he gets the Pats and the Lions at night for an extra birthday present. So we'll see if he joins us then next week. Greg, thank you for chiming in that you think you're going to win this week. Awesome. Keep me posted on whether you think you're on the result. For Howie, for Marshall, for everyone else in the chat room today, we thank you, obviously, and let us know if you do win this week. We'd love to hear about that. Any other questions here? We have about 5 minutes to kick off. I'm going to do one last refresh of the news. Doesn't seem to be anything breaking here. Again, Jay Ajayi supposedly going to see a larger role. Antonio Callaway going to start in place of Josh Gordon today in New Orleans. If you need a very, very cheap option or a last-second guy off the waiver wire to slot into your lineup, I think Callaway's the type of guy to do it. Little clarity here in terms of the Dolphins running back situation. Kalen Ballage is inactive, so you'll have Kenyon Drake and Frank Gore against the Jets today. Jermaine Kearse is returning for week 2 for the Jets against the Dolphins. Terrell Pryor's playing time might be cut, obviously, but Quincy Enunwa and Robbie Anderson sure showed up in week 1. I'd be happy playing those guys today. James Washington, a little breaking news here. Justin Hunter, the receiver for the Steelers in this fantasy bonanza game, out, healthy scratch this week against the Chiefs. So that's somewhat surprising. Rookie James Washington had a great chemistry in college with his now backup quarterback, Mason Rudolph, at Oklahoma State. Obviously, Rudolph's not going to play today as long as Roethlisberger stays healthy. But I think James Washington is going to get a look here. You have Juju. You have Antonio Brown. Who knows? Washington can go off. He was a big play guy in college for a couple years. He's someone to keep an eye on today. Paul Richardson, the talented receiver, ex-Seahawk, now with the Redskins. He's healthy. He's playing today against the Colts in a game that I think Alex Smith is going to win and bring them to 2-0. I don't like the Colts secondary at all. The only guy on the Colts I'd really feel comfortable playing today outside of Andrew Luck is T.Y. Hilton. If you're in a PPR league, I think Ryan Grant, the ex-Redskin, going back in a revenge game, is a good option. I think Doyle and Ebron right now are just going to cancel each other out, so that doesn't do anything for me. I don't think any of the running backs, Hines or Wilkins or Marlon Mack, even if he plays, are a good option here. But keep an eye on Adrian Peterson. He's one of the guys that I really like. Thank you, Steven. I appreciate your comment there. Great show. Thank you. This is really a pleasure of mine to get on here every Sunday morning and deliver this news to you guys and give you the analysis. If there's anything we could ever do throughout the week to help you out with waiver wire ads, trade questions, you drop us a note on the fantasy forum. Happy to answer those in real time for you, or as much as real time as we can get. And also, if there are things that you want to see on this show, other features, trade value charts or anything like that, drop me a note. I think it's important to know as we kind of evolve this show. It's really been a pleasure the last couple weeks to do it for you guys. And I said next week, I'm hoping we have to get permission to get this celebrity guest picker in here for some picks next week. That'll be a lot of fun. But for everyone out there, enjoy the kickoff. We are about 2 minutes from kickoff. I'm signing out. I got to go to a soccer game and then a football game, and then it's time for Pats Jags. But for everyone's teams out there, best of luck this week in your fantasy matchups, in your bets, and of course to your teams as well. We'll see you next week, and find us on the forum throughout the week. This is Adam Mankuta. Have a great week too.